you want to know how to write and sell books in the superhero genre of science fiction and fantasy, or you just want to nerd out about DC versus Marvel and about what superhero would be your friend versus your enemy, and all of those fun topics, this is absolutely your episode. This is a recording of a live stream I just had with the fantastic H.L. Burke, also known as Heidi, and we go into all the things on this live stream. There's some tangents. There's a lot of really good practical tips on how to write in the superhero genre and how it can work with your author life, as well as some of the things that you have to consider about it, such as the fact that it is, in fact, a very niche market. And so there may not be quite the readership of some larger science fiction and fantasy genres. We have a fantastic time. I'm sure you will too, listening to this playback. Again, thank you so much for hanging out with us here at the Author Culture Podcast. Now let's talk. Okay, so while we're hanging out here before we get started, although we are basically started already because you can see our awesome faces, grab a drink, get comfy, say hi in the chat. And to start us off for superpowered hijinks, okay, the classic question that I'm sure you've never been asked, Heidi, and you can also reply to this in the chat or comments. If you could have any superpower, what would it be? And as a bonus, what superpower would you really want, and what superpower would you not want? Like, absolutely wouldn't want it.
Kitten claws are the one I want because you could shred curtains with them and like use them to open packages that are shrink wrapped. And you know how great powers have great responsibility? Kitten claws are not great powers; they're minimal powers, so they come with minimal responsibility. As opposed to healing, which would be the worst superpower. If you could heal anybody, you would always be stressed out because there would always be someone to heal, and you would never be able to heal all of them, and you would go crazy. You'd have to make so many choices about how you expend that energy. There'd always be somebody who needed you. Like if you had ultimate healing powers, wouldn't you just want to hang out in like emergency rooms and cancer wards all the time? And you would have no life.
Peter Petrelli on Heroes was someone had to intervene because he just kept healing people until he was going to die, and he didn't care. He had issues. So that's why I like writing healers, though, because then they have these wonderful complexes. So, because I realize I've done healing powers a couple of times now. My latest one, Josie, she's not a superhero. She's a phoenix, but she has some healing powers, and it's terrible.
Yeah. I think you have to make them severely limited. Otherwise, it's like too, otherwise it's just too easy to...
You really do.
Yeah. Plus, then nobody gets to die in your world. Like, who dies in that world if somebody's just going around healing everybody?
Or, like, people feel really guilty. Like, you have this character who's constantly guilty, and that's kind of a buzzkill after a while.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the chat again, tell a shout out. Adam says he would like flight, but it would have to be paired with super speed, which makes sense. And
also, flight and super speed, you'd also need, like, skin that can handle the air. Because otherwise you're going to get up with your skin like blasted off. I'm just saying, if you're going super fast and you're super flying and you have regular skin, that's just a lot of exfoliation.
I like that, yeah. Now I want teleportation. I always want teleportation, especially after like having to do a lot of flights recently. I just want instantaneous travel.
Exist. I think teleportation is better as a in-world tech than a power personally. Because otherwise you just end up being the group taxi cab. And that's lame after a while.
I mean, it helps me with my urban fantasy. I just have Alice teleport people places, and then I have to find reasons for her not to be able to use her power.
I just like to imagine her friends get drunk and then call her like an Uber.
This happens. Like, it's not even a question, especially because she likes to party and hang out at clubs. So she ends up being like the DD. Designated teleporter DT, something like that.
Yeah. Well, that could get messy real quick. What happens if you throw up in a portal like you do in the back of an Uber? Not that I've ever done that, but I've heard stories.
Because hers is instantaneous. So, look, I think you would just puke on the other one after you got to the other side. So this is why all of y'all, you knew you had to show up, because we're already talking about getting drunk and teleporting. And then where would you puke? This is where we're going here.
Don't teleport and drink.
Don't teleport and drink. There we go.
That's how you end up in Antarctica.
That's how you... Now I have to have someone do that. So we've gone there, and I think we've done quite a bit with that question. I don't know. I think we're going to jump right into things now because we have a good group of people in there, which is fantastic and super exciting. And that you guys took the time to hang out with us, and anyone else who shows up, good to have you here. And welcome to Author Culture with me. Oh, hi, Theodore. Welcome to Author Culture with me, Janeen Ippolito, and of course, my special guest here, the Chaos Gremlin, H.L. Burke.
So chaotic.
If you're new here, we help science fiction and fantasy authors achieve sustainable success in a chaotic publishing industry. And sometimes in the live stream, we kind of bring the chaos too, but we're also going to have cool things to talk about tonight. So that's good as well. And Heidi, what kind of cool stuff do you do with superheroes for anyone who doesn't know?
I write books about them, and then sometimes I put out anthologies with them, and then sometimes they talk to me when I'm driving on my commute so that I'm not alone.
And sometimes you're like totally zoned out when you're at Costco with your husband because your brain is talking, huh?
Yeah, it's now Sam's Club. I keep mixing them up. Oregon has Costco and West Virginia has Sam's Club, and they're very similar. Like there's a couple differences, but like they're like mirror worlds of each other. Costco is mirror world Sam's Club or vice versa, and so I keep calling the wrong thing. But yeah, I'll be wandering around Costco or Sam's Club doing dialogue in my head for my most recent book. Matt will be like, "Are you okay?"
I think that's just a writer thing too, like the whole scowling thing or the whole cranky thing, or
if you're doing it like in this is another mirror world thing. In Oregon, it's Fred Meyer. Here, it's Kroger. But if you're walking around doing emotional scenes in your head and like making the facial expressions and I do that too.
That is definitely a thing.
Yeah.
And for any of y'all in the chat, go ahead and share any weird writer things you do because we're all about sometimes having those weird writer things here.
And also, are there any other mirror stores? Like we got Kroger and Fred Meyer, and there's Vons and Safeway. Vons and Safeway are Mirror World, and Hardee's and Carl's Jr. are Mirror World. So, but somehow they exist in the same universe, which means that our universe at one point had collided with another universe, and one universe had Hardee's and Kroger and Vons and Sam's Club, and the other one had Costco, and all the other ones combined in this world that has both.
And that's how it goes sometimes.
I've had a cold all week, and I'm a little loopy.
But we're doing this anyway, and it's gonna be great. So we're talking specifically about how to write superhero fiction tonight, because you've done over 20 books on that, and you've done Kickstarters, and you won some awards too. Or at least one award for that. You won the which book was that?
A few times. Reunion won for novella. I was a finalist for Reformed and Power On. Power On made it all the way up to the top podium for Book of the Year, which was really nice.
So talking about all these superheroes, what makes a book a superhero book? So what are like the core elements? What are some things that your superhero book has to have to make it a superhero book versus a glorified urban fantasy or like a thriller with maybe like one weird test tube super soldier in it?
Well, they're all there's a lot of cross genre. I feel like a lot of superhero is kind of in the tone where it can be a little bit intentionally campy comparatively to say urban fantasy. And usually the powers are science adjacent but very ill defined, which I think is really cool because it's like they usually have a sciencey background like genetics or quantum rays or gamma radiation, which makes absolutely no sense, but necessarily magic. I mean, you do get some magic in superhero universes, but I don't think it should be the core of it. Otherwise, you're pushing into urban fantasy. I also think that the setting is important. It goes best in contemporary and like a world that we are in. Comparatively, other things like urban fantasy, they'll have like this underworld where there's these worlds, a fantasy world that exists underneath our world and we're unaware of it. So it makes it feel like it is another world, another universe. To be a superhero book, it needs to feel like it could happen here if we just threw some superpowers into our world or some super tech sometimes. Like I have a preference for powered heroes over say Batman types who are just techie geniuses with the stuff. That's just a personal preference. Both are legitimate. So I think that to me, those are the two things because it is kind of it is kind of one of those genres that can mesh really well with other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And yeah, Batman's hero power being that he's rich, of course. And his is interesting because with Iron Man, he's also rich, but he's really, really smart. And so his tech really is part of his superpowered brain versus Batman. I mean, he has someone he hires to make stuff too. So he doesn't even have that
Depending on the
personal brain
version.
connection.
Excuse me. Yeah, some versions of Batman are pretty. I mean, the whole detective
It's true,
element.
it's true. But I still don't see it the same level as Iron Man, where he really has, like, his ego is involved in that in some way. Like, he's a super genius type who's just constantly tinkering and making, like, how many suits can he make?
Yeah,
Because
well,
he
also
can.
Batman kind of plays on being the billionaire playboy secret identity is that he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want to be taken too seriously. He wants to be seen as Bruce Wayne in the public eye, whereas Iron Man, of course, is Tony Stark is Iron Man. He will just tell you.
Yeah. Yep. Actually, I found that in the movie that wasn't, I don't think that was planned. Like when they were filming that, he wasn't actually supposed to reveal himself. And then he did. No, like, we're keeping it, like, we're keeping that take.
Yeah, but it's iconic to the character, and it's become kind of very essential to who he is going forward. Whereas Batman being a secret is very tied into who that character is. It's like they do everything
Mm-hmm.
they can to not expose it in most versions.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I see in the chat saying Batman's tagline is "World's Greatest Detective," and I guess that would be the difference between Batman and Iron Man. Is Iron Man is like very extroverted and kind of a super nerd about it, but kind of a sexy nerd who's a playboy, and Batman is a broody detective sort of thing, more of an introvert maybe. And I think there are interesting things you can say if it's someone with a suit, but you are saying different things, and I think you brought that out. Hero as a genre is it's a diverse genre. I don't think it's the same as when you and I co-hosted a podcast. We talked about how steampunk is almost an aesthetic more than a genre because it's so visual. Superhero, it is more than just an aesthetic, and in fact you often don't have as much aesthetic. You have more of like the characters, but I would say it's very character driven, and it's very most individual driven on how you build an individual with their powers or with their special suit and what that says about them.
Yeah, and I think that's what draws me to it is comparatively superhero fiction tends to take, for the most part, normal people and put them in extraordinary situations. There are people who you could meet. You know, Spider-Man's very a kid on the block, boy next door. So is Captain America. There are some exceptions, but a lot of them are just normal guys.
So when you're building out like your cast of characters or your single character in your superhero book, I would say you definitely have to think about the powers pretty carefully. And I know it's something when you're brainstorming a new superhero book, the first thing, like you think about the character interactions because you're character driven, but then you're thinking about the powers and what it says about the person and how you're going to use them in the story.
Yeah, but it depends on sometimes. Sometimes the powers are very much telling a story about who the character is, and it says something about them. Like Fade has his thing where he breaks down and can go through walls, but he's afraid of being contained. He always needs his freedom, but he's also afraid that he can't have a home. But then other times it's just what is the most plot convenient, and I just really need the power, so I grab it, pluck it
It's
onto
true.
someone. Or it's just cool. Like I ironically gave Wildfire my most stable character who has like no temper firepower. And he's literally fiery, but he's the least fiery of my characters, and it's just funny.
Well, and so basically the power can be something that really connects the character, or the power can be something that sort of challenges the character and, is a fun contrast that kind of works as a foil against their personality.
Yeah. And I think the power would eventually shape your personality, even if it isn't something that you initially feel drawn to or, attached to. That said, yeah, I like to like kind of mash things together and see how they work. And sometimes it's very natural and sometimes it's more um and that's just what's fun. Like I don't think Nixie's water powers have anything to do with her personality, but I hadn't had a water power sable super able person yet, and I just really wanted one, especially because I knew it would interact really well with Switch's lightning. So
Mm-hmm.
in that case, I just went for the fun thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, and even then you're thinking about the interaction between her and Switch. So it's still kind of setting up that. Plus, I don't know, I always thought of Nixie as very, buoyant, like water. She's very buoyant.
As I say, I feel like buoyant things float in water. So if she had boat powers,
There we go. She floats in
she's
water.
boat man, boat girl.
She's boat girl. There we go.
Girl, that girl's been typoed.
There we go.
That's what happens with the error, the supervillain meme about the errorist who makes you do typos.
I think that one other thing that comes up with superpowers and superheroes a lot is the idea of what is the government's role in it versus what is the individual's role, because there's always talk about a vigilante versus you have DOSA. So you have this whole government department that pretty much likes to keep tabs on the superpowered people and know where they are and such. I mean, you can kind of be free. Yeah, they're incompetent, but they are a really big presence. Whereas, like, if you think about, I was rewatching some seasons of Arrow, the CW show Arrow, and part of the first couple seasons is, oh, it's a vigilante, it's against the law, it's a vigilante, they're doing their own thing, they're against order and an authority.
Yeah. I mean, that's also like a choice because, like, the Avengers were authorized. In some versions, Batman is an authorized deputy, so.
Yeah, so it can really kind of depend on where people stand with that and what kind of things you're choosing. But that's definitely, if you're looking at writing a superhero story, that's definitely another angle you can go, or at least think about is your vigilante like official, or are they not official and they're kind of under the radar with that?
Yeah, and that's going to influence your whole story. Like, do they need a secret identity? Are they going to be like having to get arrested? Like, how do they have to take in their people? Because if you can't turn them over to the police directly, what do you do with them? Yeah, however you do, I think it really have to decide what kind of story you want to tell, and then work at it from there, and keep it consistent. Because otherwise, it's going to drive people crazy.
So someone's sitting down, they're figuring out their powers, and they're figuring out their kind of story thing, and they're going to have to figure out, okay, what does the government have any involvement or not in this? Is it a local story or is it like a big national story? Which you've done both. You've done books that have been very like had a larger scope, and then a lot of your books have a much smaller scope.
Yeah, I tend towards the smaller ones just because it's easier to manage, and most of my heroes don't have like world-ending powers. They've got small powers, which is much easier to keep them contained. But yeah, I always prefer to save a person over saving the world. It's just easier to manage, and usually the emotional connection is easier to get. Plus, once you've saved the world once, it's hard to escalate, and that kind of ends how many books you can write.
That's true. That's usually in comic books when they end up restarting the series again because, oh, that happened. Or they like retcon things or stuff like that. And of course, the other thing that superheroes let you do is the whole thing about a superhero versus a supervillain is a hero versus a villain, good versus evil. So it really naturally lends to stories with morality in some way because you have a good guy and a bad guy, right?
Not in my universe so much. Like in Dosaverse, villain versus hero is kind of a almost a political thing. It's more of what Dosa has chosen. Of course, the villains do mostly do crime, but a lot of them are not terrible people, and that comes across. A lot of them end up getting reformed. Some of them end up doing their own thing, kind of adjacent to the Dosa, but not the same. But there is always like you. It's hard to do that sort of. I mean, it's hard to do any sort of story well without having an actual good versus evil plot, in my opinion. Otherwise, you what are you fighting? Like if the good guys and the bad guys, or the antagonist and the protagonist, are both equally good, I mean, you can get some conflict out of that, but in the end, it's kind of a little bit of a letdown for me. You have to make a choice on what side of the story you want people to fall, and I don't like it to always be super black and white, which is why I've chosen to make Dosa sometimes incompetent and sometimes corrupt, and some villains actually have good motives. So yeah, that said, there is a lot to be said about just standing up for and fighting, that in that genre.
Yeah. And even the fact that you're having these questions, like the whole idea of the supervillain rehabilitation project says, okay, these people need to be rehabilitated from something, and that matters. And if they're rehabilitated, then they can fight for the good guys and they can do that. There is some opportunity for redemption.
Yeah, and redemption can look different in a lot of ways. It's because not everybody's going to always fit the Dosa mold, and Dosa is stronger when it has these people who are able to think outside of like their boxes too. So that does kind of influence things. About there's the villains who come in and they have their own ways of doing things with it. Like sometimes it's actually ends up being showing mercy instead of justice. And that can actually be a villain move, and sometimes just because it goes against the hard written letter of the law. And I think that's also something I want to explore is like what's always legal isn't what's always right. And sometimes the villains have to make that choice, to be a villain for good.
Yeah. You have a quote actually on a t-shirt, right?
Yeah, it's act like a hero, think like a villain. Which I think it partially means just the villain doesn't leave anything on the table, right? But then you always have to moderate it with the action of a hero. a villain will think of all possible ways. Everything's on the table for a villain. But in the end, you have to choose to act like a hero, which means you may know the way to murder that person. That doesn't mean you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that, and the superhero book I wrote, that was something where the character just had to get told, okay, you keep dancing on both sides of the law, but if the good guys don't know you're a good guy, eventually they're going to shoot you. And then you're going to get like everyone attacking you because you're not taking sides.
So I don't know. In my version, it kind of falls on the side that like you can sometimes that rigid side, that rigid us versus them, it's going to cause trouble for people, and it ends up biting people in the rear end a lot of times. So I like to have it play with like sometimes you have to be willing to go outside of the legal law to do the right thing, and sometimes you have to make choices. I do like to play a little bit in the gray areas because of that, because I don't know, I don't like characters who are so tied to the law good that they won't do the right thing, if that makes sense. And they drive me crazy.
Yeah.
And so I do like to put that sort of quandary in front of my characters every so often, just to show that sometimes you do have to go and step out and be villains for a couple days to fix something. Like the story I'm writing right now, Game Changer, has that between Sean and Jake, because Sean is the White Knight and Jake is the former villain who plays the chaotic good. And um, Sean is kind of pushed into Jake's world because Dosa is after Oliver's father because they think he did something that he didn't do. And so Oliver's going off book and Jake's helping him go off book to investigate the stuff. And something he shouldn't be doing, but Jake just says, Jake gives the sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission line, and then they just go and do it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I like to play with that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that is worth playing with. I think more of what I was reflecting on that is that at a certain point, even if you're going to do that, you still have to be able to trust some people to know what reasons you're actually crossing that line for, and where you're ultimately standing on in that. You do have to open yourself to trust some people. I think it's funny that both of us have these like these stories that are slightly skeptical of government agencies, and you're, married to a former Marine and I'm an Air Force brat.
That's why we're skeptical.
That's why.
Yeah. We have met very few Marines who are not skeptical of the government.
Yeah, yep. Air Force was the same way. I was like, this is something my parents instilled in me, and they were both in the Air Force.
They've seen things.
They've seen things. Also just the bureaucracy, the stuff of, that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, so yeah, that I did very much base Dosa off my experiences of being a military spouse and like some of the nonsense that happens. It's not necessarily always malevolent, but it's incompetent, and sometimes it's hard to see the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was definitely a theme in my books.
So we're talking about someone who's just sitting down to write superhero fiction. I mean, this isn't a huge market here. Like, this isn't a genre that is very well known. Still, people are used to watching on TV or in movies more than reading it in books. Of course, they're used to comic books too, but
very different way of absorbing entertainment.
And so one way that you can approach that is by diving into adjacent genres, which one of the easier ways is you can sort of tag it under urban fantasy. It's not urban fantasy because you don't have like elves and things, although ironically in comic books you will have Thor show up, which is urban fantasy. But you can...
Or night elves or dark elves or whatever.
My goodness, yeah, just kind of random stuff like that, or magic shows up because you have Doctor Strange.
Yeah, I just feel like they would just throw anything at comics back in the day. It was like, we're doing wizards now.
There we go.
Zombies.
And also, shout out there in the chat box, what's your favorite? Like, are you Marvel or are you DC? Or are you something else? Because that's a big question to ask. Just let us know. So Heidi, first, before we go on further with the marketing side of this, Marvel or DC?
Overall, Marvel. I think my first real superhero exposure was probably Batman the Animated Series over anything else. But generally speaking, I prefer Marvel's movies and TV shows and stuff over DC.
Is there any particular reason?
Marvel tends to deal with more down-to-earth human characters, and DC tends to have more like Wonder Woman and Superman and Martian Manhunters that have an otherworldly sense to them, that they've come to our world to find their way into it. And there are some exceptions. Obviously, the Flash is a pretty normal guy, stuff like that. But I would say the balance And Marvel does have some gods too, obviously, but the balance between gods to normal people is more tipped towards normal people on the Marvel side than it is on the DC side. And that's what I prefer. I prefer the normal guys.
Yeah, I found that too. And my first thing was X-Men, and that's Marvel. So right away I'm over there. And even that, X-Men, as soon as you include something like X-Men where you have people who have like one power but just want to live a normal life, then you're going to have a lot more of that grounded sense, or much more of the population, still a tiny amount, but more of the population has powers, then you're not going to have that sense of reverence over them in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what my favorite one of the reasons I started writing superheroes partially was a lot of those like Avengers just hanging around memes that people do is like
Yeah.
around the Avengers Tower on what on movie night, or who's ordering Chinese, or who's introducing Steve to what new TV shows because he hasn't watched them yet. And those are the things
Yeah.
that I think made me think a little bit more about how superheroes can be a venue not just for like these huge world-ending stories, but just for like people having some fun. So, which I like.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, DC can be great too. And I know they have some, like, Batman is pretty cool. I have enjoyed the Aquaman movies with Jason Momoa because of Jason Momoa in it, and it was just fun. But even that, I liked that because it reminded me more of a Marvel movie where it didn't take itself quite as seriously and had like fun stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, I grew up on a lot of the Batmans. Well, Batman was pretty cheesy back when I was growing up on it. But yeah, and I liked Wonder Woman fine. But yeah, I have overall better experience with Marvel. I mean, even when Marvel's bad, it's usually just forgettable bad as opposed to turns me off bad.
Okay, Adam says he's a DC fanboy and a Snyderverse fanboy. Oh, you can stick around, Adam. It's okay. No, I do. I have to say, Snyderverse definitely made its mark very strongly on the DC universe. It did that.
Yeah, I've been told that I just haven't had the time to watch a movie that long.
It has a lot of, I have to say, Zack Snyder really uses the medium to try to say a lot of things, and I will give him kudos for that, which is why Justice League, when he wasn't at the helm, was just kind of painful because it was so weird to have something that wasn't, you could tell it wasn't his voice in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he definitely uses the medium to say a lot of different potent things that he's interested in saying. Adam says, in Christ, there's no DC nor Marvel. We can all be friends. It's true. Although, when I was dating my future husband, we did ask, okay, DC or Marvel? Like, we got that out of the way. And, like, one of our early conversations, I think even before we were dating, like, which side. But then we'll watch DC stuff, too, because we're both geeks. So we'll really go for both sides.
Yeah, I tend to only watch about 2 movies a year, so I tend to be very picky about which ones I do. So that also influences it because there's just too much to keep up with nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. I'm pickier now, so I mean, I have a lot of time. I mean, I like to just throw on movies while I'm working because it'll leave background noise for me because I can do that. Like, I know some people need silence. I don't.
I don't need
But
silence, but I can't do movies. I will definitely pay more attention to the movie, or I will completely focus on what I'm doing and have no idea what's going on in the movie next time I check back in on it.
I can balance it out. But Marvel's just been so iffy lately, especially all the stuff on Disney, just kind of throwing thing after thing after thing out. There's
a point where it's too much content and it's coming out so fast, and then everything is so expensive. It's like, how are you spending all this money?
All right, everyone out there. So here's your next question. Favorite Marvel movie? Or you can do your favorite 2 movies if you want to do that. We want to hear it.
I'm still going to be the odd man out who likes Captain Marvel the most because it has a cat.
I think that's a very underrated reason for liking it, I have to say. Like, I think a lot of people don't understand the appeal of the cat.
The cat is so huge. And there's other reasons. Like, I like having a snarky female who snarks because we don't get that enough. Like, she's a smirky girl and I'm a smirky girl. And it's kind of like a buddy road trip. And then there's the cute alien kid. But the appeal of the cat, though, Goose, is it cannot be underestimated how much I freaked out when I first saw the first poster. And there's like the first poster is her going through the bay doors, and to the side there's just this little cat silhouette, like almost hidden, and I'm like, the cat is there. I love that
so
cat.
I'm gonna ruin my own question because I like way too many comic book things. So I'm gonna give you my top 5, and even that is really hard for me. The second X-Men movie is pretty much perfect in terms of for X-Men. X-Men's has a really rough road for movies. That one was pretty much perfect. First Avengers movie, first Iron Man movie, second Captain America movie, and I love Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. There we go. I left out like 15 others and 2 TV shows, but there we go.
I prefer 2 over 1.
Oh, and then someone mentioned Shang-Chi. I love Shang-Chi. If you have to like see one other Marvel thing, you have to see Shang-Chi.
So I have a different list of movies that I think are my favorites versus ones that I think are objectively better. Because if I were to pick the best Marvel movie, it probably would be Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I think that just from a writing and technical standpoint, it's probably the best done. But I don't necessarily like it the most because it doesn't have things like cats in it.
Oh my goodness. And there's my husband showing up in the chat box. Hi, Steven. Oh, he brought up Aquaman. That's true. Aquaman was just fun because it was bro fun. If you wanted a bro fun movie, that would be Aquaman.
If we gave Captain America a cat, it would be Captain America, and he would be my favorite thing ever.
So I think you need to just do like as a new marketing thing, just insert cats randomly into all of do memes with cats in these various movies.
I've had a lot of cats in my marketing. They keep coming up.
So. It happens. And they've had a couple of cat superpowers too.
Yeah, a few. If I had the amount of times that a person falls in love with a cat in my universe, if I had a nickel for every time a person falls in love with a cat in my universe, I'd have 2 nickels, which is not a lot.
It's still 2 nickels. Yes, it is.
Still 2 nickels.
Okay, so if someone's marketing in this, one of the things that you do have to recognize is that it is more challenging. So if you can hook yourself into an adjacent genre, you're better. I wrote a lot of urban fantasy before I did my first superhero book. And even though my superhero book is definitely different, like it's definitely superheroes, I created a similar tone to some of my urban fantasy so that I'd get crossover readers. And they go over and like, yeah, it's not urban fantasy, but it's still fun and reminds me of that. And I know for you have the superhero rom-com series as well as all of the other series that you've had going.
Yeah, well, I tried to hook into the Hallmark stuff, but the audiences for that I do that just because I like it. I don't really know that there's that much crossover. Every time I've tried to convince rom-com readers that they really want to read my superhero stuff, I think they still think it's a little bit strange. I tend to be writing for people who don't know that they want to read romances. They just know they want to read superhero and then accidentally find the romances. And actually, apparently, I'm a little bit dark for rom-coms because my characters do have somewhat tragic backstories, and it's just a little bit not fluffy enough in places. So, but I think that for me, word of mouth is what sells these stories, and it's definitely one of those things where people have to be told that they'll like it by somebody else. And the other thing that sells it is the snippets, because it's not selling so hard on the tropes. The tropes, just don't seem to move these stories very much for me. But posting snippets of quotes and jokes and stuff tends to be where I get the most reaction. People need to actually see how it works because a lot of people just don't understand it yet. They don't know what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah, yep, I agree with that.
Educating readers is really hard. There's only really 2 ways to do it. One is to show them a pretty good sample, and the other is to get someone else to tell them they'll like it who's not you.
And I mean, I've done some pretty well. Mine took a bit where people just, again, wouldn't understand what it was at first, but I hit on that, and this is a very basic tagline, but it seemed to work. A Marvel meets The Office kind of thing, where it has that everyone understands Marvel and they understand The Office with a kind of monotonous humor of everyday things. And because my character is a superhero publicist and works in an office with supervillains, it has that kind of vibe. And so I think it really comes down to like having the quotes and those kind of things and then trying to find out, okay, what kind of things are people going to connect with this? Like, what is this similar to in some way?
Yeah. And I just tried to do that with the Marvel versus Hallmark thing, and it seems to appeal to cozy fantasy readers more than it does to the Hallmark thing. The Hallmark is almost adjacent at this point. And like I said, it's partially because I do tend to dive into things that's Hallmark expects a really super cozy stuff, and I've been kind of getting away from that just because they a little irritated with me because a character might have like a tragic death in their background or an abusive mother or something like that. And even that's just too much, even if it's not shown, even if it's just backstory.
Yeah, I think cozy makes more sense with that. And I think that's something else to remember when you're talking about superheroes. First of all, it depends on what you have in it. So if you have a lot more detailed knowledge in it. And a lot, like you really break down the science a lot, then you are going to be tagged more as science fiction. But if you don't go into it as much, then you're pretty much tagged as fantasy, even though technically, you don't have magic or anything. You're going to find that fantasy readers enjoy that more. But if you go into the science a lot more, then you're going to find more science fiction people enjoy it.
I'm sure there are some superhero people who are doing the sciencey thing, but I haven't found any yet. I think almost every superhero one that I've read is more skewing towards the fake science fantasy level. Like Arthur Mayer's Sidekicks was that way. Don't Tell My Mom or Don't Tell My Parents I'm a Supervillain. Also fun techie stuff. I'm trying to think of any that I've read that are on hard science, and I can't think of one. I'm sure they're out there, but I have not encountered one yet.
So it's just basically getting creative. And so that's just a reality of the genre for all of you guys who are watching this now and listening to this later. When you think about superheroes, you think about a movie or a comic book or a cartoon or a TV show. You don't often think of books. And that's a really good sign that if you're going to write superhero fiction, it can be really fun and you can get sales with it, but it's not going to be the most natural fit for marketing. You have to work at it more.
Yeah, and those cross venue followers don't necessarily I don't know how many times I've seen it with YouTubers who put out a book and they've got all these like YouTube followers, but so they write a book and unless they're like a really, really huge YouTuber, it does not necessarily follow that they're going to get people buying the book. I've seen that from some mildly successful YouTubers. Like if you're a megastar, sure, they'll just buy anything with your name on it. But like the mid-range ones, you think, oh, they've got 200,000 followers. If they put out a book, it's going to sell so many copies. And I've seen them do that and then post about their sales, and I'm like, those aren't great numbers, even by my standards, because people who watch YouTube videos aren't necessarily people reading books. I think the same thing could be said with people who read movies or maybe even comics. I say, as a mother who has a graphic novel obsessed daughter who I'm always trying to get to read chapter books, and she's like, yeah, she'll read like 3 a year. And then she'll go get a stack this high of graphic novels and read them all in a day. But, it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you're talking about visual medium to text to primarily text-based medium, I mean, I know you do sort of read a comic book, but there's lots of visuals in it.
Yeah, and I've watched how Claire reads and with a graphic novel, and she'll read the text, but then she'll just linger on the pictures for a very long time, and it's very essential to how she understands the story, and that's even with her having very high for her age reading comprehension as a kid. I know is testing really high in reading. It's not necessarily about the ability, it's just the preference. And she just prefers those pictures and stuff. And like, that's just what she wants.
And so this would be an area where if you're in it, like, don't go into it saying, hey, I'm going to be a first time author and I am going to make all the money at this. Like, I might suggest a different genre for that if you're in it purely for like making scads and scads of dollars. I mean, I'm sure there's some marketing whizzes out there who could do it
instead.
Yeah. If you actually know, that's a good point. If you're really interested in the superhero thing, might I introduce you to urban fantasy first, and then once that goes well, then do your superhero stuff? Because actually, I will say that is one thing that I have got a number of sales off is that my urban fantasy readers who admittedly are waiting for my next book that I'm working on are kind of like, well, this is close enough. I'll read over to it. So if profit is your main driver, work in an adjacent genre first and then do your superheroes. But if you're doing it just for the fun of it or the love of it, then I think it's a great way to just explore more of those stories.
Yeah, at this point in the superhero stuff, it's like it's marketing it is a lot of work, and I've got a day job now and like so many other projects. A lot of me is kind of content with the audience I have and just keep feeding them more and more of it. So I think it's also a very good niche genre because it is so rare. Like let's say you're an epic fantasy writer, right? And you have your fan who just really loves epic fantasy. She's probably reading you, but she's probably also reading like a dozen other authors. The one good thing about the superhero niche is if somebody wants superheroes, their options are limited to me and maybe five other writers. So I get them all. But it does lead to some fans who are just like really just waiting for that next one to come out because it's the only fix they're going to get on that, which I don't know how sustainable it is, but for building a very vibrant audience that really cares about your stuff, it's really great that way.
Yeah.
but it is a
I
much
mean,
smaller audience.
you have fans who've written short stories and novellas for your universe?
Yeah, a few.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, they really love it, and like they get sucked into the world, and they want to be a part of the world, and like fan fiction and fan art, which is like I've written a lot, and this has gotten more fan art or adjacent stuff, more people who will have theories about the characters, and they'll write me, and like one of them was writing a like their list of a cookbook for the characters. I don't know if I'll ever see it, but I know they were working on it. So they just way more enthusiasm than in other genres I've written.
So, kind of in summary for this, in terms of writing it, I think especially because it's going to be a smaller niche genre, make sure that you enjoy what you're saying. Make sure that you do have those elements of not that you don't have to have hard line, rigid good versus evil, but make sure you're discussing that in your story. Make sure that it is something where people are like, okay, I'm going to choose to think like, to think like a villain here. You're thinking in those kind of terms, or at least bringing that in there something, because you are dealing with people who are trying to figure out how to handle these kind of powers. And with great power comes great responsibility. And think about your powers.
It's one thing that it does. So the reluctant hero is a trope that I don't think works well in superhero. You have to make that choice to be a hero eventually, like within a pretty quick time frame, like first act. That's first act stuff. Like other genres can draw out a reluctant hero for a very long time.
Yeah.
I will get so annoyed if a superhero does that. Like you need to know by the first act, end of the first act, dude, whether you're in or out on this hero stuff.
Yeah, because it does get old, because that's not what we're here for. We're
No,
not here
for
for the endless back and forth. We're here for the heroes, and we're here for what the heroes are going to do, and we're going to hear what the villains are doing, and if the villain's really a villain, and what does it all mean, all of that stuff.
What does it mean?
What does it mean?
What does it mean? You need more angst. What does it mean?
And then when you're marketing, just expect that because it's a niche genre, if anyone tells you, yeah, go into superhero, super easy, or if someone misguidedly says, oh yeah, because no one's there, it's a genre that's ripe for people to come in and make tons of money on. No, sometimes people, like the heavy hitters, aren't there because it's a small niche area, and you can still have a great audience connection with it, but just have some realistic expectations.
I've never seen anybody claim superhero was going to be a moneymaker. Maybe they're out there, but like it was making lists
there's
even
people
before,
who are always willing to sell you like the Brooklyn Bridge or something, but
yeah. But even before I started writing it, it was popping up on lists of genres agents don't want for a long time.
Gosh.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So I think that was super helpful, and I'm excited you're here. So we have one great question that came up in the chat box too. Which superhero would you want as your friend, and which hero, even if genuinely well-meaning and kind, would you not want to have a friendship?
Can I still say the cat?
Yeah.
Or is that cheating? Who's the cat?
You can say the cat.
I love him so much. Or her. It's hard because that cat is a male cat. The cat actor is a male cat. I think his name is oh gosh, I used to know his name. There's actually a few of them, but there's a lead male cat, and he's a male cat, and you can tell by his face that's a male cat. But Goose, the character, is a female cat, so that always confuses. Or Florkin. I'm going to say that I'm going to admit that the Goose the cat answer is cheating, and I'm going to pick somebody else though. I'm too old to hang out with Spider-Man. It would be creepy.
You'd be like a mother figure to him.
I know. I can't do that. I have my daughter would flirt with him, and it would just get awkward. And so I can't do Spider-Man. I feel like if I had to pick a one I didn't want to hang out with, John Smith, Green Lantern, drives me crazy. He's just such a stick up his butt. He's always grumpy. I don't want to deal with him. He's always grumpy. And actually, that is my other question. Again, going from Justice League Unlimited, I would like to hang out with that version of the Flash, because he was a lot of fun, and he was just the one guy who was willing to make fun of himself and like deflate the situation no matter what. But he was also very kind and empathetic, and he would care about people around him. And I think that me and the Flash would be good buddies. So I'll take him.
I think, yes, I could see that.
And Goose the cat.
Goose the cat. Okay, I don't know. See, I'm thinking I'm going to cross over. I was torn. So I think Professor X, the only thing is that he can read your mind. But especially Professor X, played by Patrick Stewart, is like my favorite and is awesome because basically you're sort of friends with Patrick Stewart, who also seems pretty awesome. So Professor X, and for DC, actually Superman, but only certain Superman versions, like not
the one you don't want to hang out with, or the one you do.
No, I would, but only if it's the one, Superman and Lois. They did a series, Superman and Lois. I watched the first 2 seasons of that, and that was a very friendly, likable Superman. Like they chose a guy who actually looked really attractive, but also believably geeky at the same time. Like he just,
is that the one
his
with
ears,
the lady from Grimm in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was, he was both, he's really attractive, but his ears are a bit big, and he just looks like he could be a bit of a yokel and like really fun to hang out with.
Yeah.
And for not hanging out with, I mean, I'm sorry, Eric Lensher, you have issues. So Magneto, nope.
Does Magneto count as a superhero? Are we also doing villains?
He's super villain. That's true. That doesn't count. Okay. For superheroes, I wouldn't want to hang out with.
If we're not hanging out with villains, there's a lot of villains.
Of course, there's a lot of villains. It's true. You got me there. Okay. Oh, well, who was that one? I can't think of his name. I mean, to be fair, Green Lantern is really annoying. So that's a pretty good one to say. Yeah, just that. Not so much fun. Man. Okay, I'm going to bring up Superman again. Brandon Routh, Superman from Superman Returns, because he was just boring.
Incredibly forgettable. I don't remember.
Yeah, he was boring.
Superman, which is sad because.
But that's why, like, it'd be nothing. Because a lot of them, I think, even if I didn't like them as a character, they're still at least interesting. But he was just like a blank slate, which is so weird because the actor can be really charismatic.
Yep.
Nope, not there.
The writing in that was sus.
It was terrible. Alrighty, so now we've talked about all these things and about how you have people writing for your universe, and I hear that people are writing for your universe right now. You have some anthologies coming out.
Yes, there's 2 that are up on a Kickstarter right now. These will be 2 anthologies of 17 stories total. The first anthology has 9 stories and the second has 8. Both have a story from me and then from, I guess it would be 16 other writers, including Janeen here. She's got one in there.
Including me.
Got a lot of first-time writers, or I would say first published writers in these ones. Like, I like that when my story or my anthology gets to bring some new voices to the table. So I'm excited for that. And then there's also some old favorites, some returning favorites. These are my second and third anthology I've done in this universe, and my first one. So C.O. Bonham's returning, Amber Gabriel's returning, Janelle Leanne Schmidt's returning. I think those are the only 3 returning voices this time. Karen Eisenbray is returning, so that's 4. So if I miss somebody who is in both sets, I'm sorry. I have a cold. I'm blaming everything on the cold. But yeah, so it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yep. So hop over there. It is currently funded, which is awesome, and we have our first stretch goal. But we just dropped some new stuff there, including we'd love these to be audiobooks. So
it would be very nice to be audiobooks.
If you were so inclined.
I am listening to the audio files for Power Play, which Rena Gell did for me. That's one of my second things. So I'm very much in the audio. Like, it's like a movie of your book almost, at least for me. Because I like to be surprised by some of the portrayals. I'm weird about that. Like, I'll tell my cover artist to surprise me, and I want to see what the characters look like in somebody else's mind too. I don't have a very tight hold on my fictional IPs. I like it when other people give me their spin on them. So the audio version, it's a lot like that. I feel like I'd be an author who would be decent to work with a movie studio. I'm not saying you should
buy my scripts, care.
But yeah. I would be a little more open-handed about some of the creative decisions, just because I just want to see what other people do with the ideas,
So if that's interesting to you, hop over then. I believe it finishes March 28th. So if you're watching or listening to this after then, it has closed. But if not, hop over there. 10 days, hop over there and check it out. And yeah, thank you so much for hanging out with us here at Author Culture for the first live stream. And in a comment, go ahead and shout out your favorite superhero and of course, Marvel or DC. And if you haven't already, do hit the like and subscribe button so that you never miss upcoming live streams as well. Thank you. And thank you, Heidi, for being here.
Sorry.
Go forth and be awesome.